So how did it bridge into the hustle? Where'd the idea for the hustle come from?
So I had a business that was a roommate matching thing and we sold it. And I didn't sell it for a ton of money, but I was in my early 20s, 22, 23, 24, and I had a little bit of money, many tens of thousands, maybe 100,000s, maybe 100K or something to my name. And I was like, well, that's obviously not enough to live off of, but that's a cool start. Let's start a business. And so I had this conference called HustleCon, which was like it was like an entrepreneurial conference, but all the speakers were people who had founded huge companies, but they weren't technical. So like the woman who started Stitch Fix, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, the folks at Casper, all types of like companies like that. And in order to make that and I just did the conference to meet people, and maybe I could like partner with someone after. I was like, maybe I'll just meet someone. I don't know. Maybe this might lead to something. I'm not sure what it's going to lead to, but I'm just going to do it. And in order to make it popular, I created a newsletter, and that newsletter I would write all the time, and that newsletter got really popular, and the conference made a lot of money too. I didn't expect it to, but it did. And I was like, that's kind of funny. Let's do it again. So I did it again, and it made even more money. It made like $250,000 in profit in like 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do conferences forever because that's really hard. But this newsletter thing that I made, like maybe that has legs. Like what can we do with that? And that's kind of how the hustle came to be.
So originally the newsletter is just supporting the conference. It was to help you sell conference
Yeah.
tickets. And what was the
Yeah.
content of the newsletter originally? Similar to today, or was it different?
No, it was different. It was entrepreneurial. So I would just write articles about the speakers, but I would do it in kind of a funny, interesting voice that was like wrapped in copywriting. I was a self-taught copywriter, so I knew how to write to get people's attention. And B, I did something interesting early on, which was I was like, man, if I send an email, let's say I get a 50% open rate and then a 5% click through. If I send an email to 1,000 people, that means only like 50 people are clicking my thing. Whereas I have 500 of them just viewing the article, like, or viewing the email. I should just put all the content in the email. And that's what I did back in 2014, 2015. And that was considered kind of unique and original and at the time. And that is where I was like, okay, this could be kind of cool. And then I was like, all right, let's start a blog where I just write these stories a bunch of times a week. And that's what I started doing. And then I said, shit, this is hard to come up with this type of stuff all the time. Let's do something even more. Let's do news. There's news every single day. I could do that all the time. That's easy. And so in 2016, we only did news.
So you started this newsletter, and do you remember when you did the first conference? Like, how many people attended the conference? How many people were on the newsletter? Just so everybody can get some context of the size.
When I started the newsletter, it was the HustleCon's newsletter was one thing that started with zero, and after 6 weeks, I think I had 3 or 4 thousand subscribers, and 350 people came to the event, and I think it made 60,000 in revenue. And that event was it took 6 weeks from like deciding to do it and then doing it. So in like 6 weeks, it got maybe it was 2,000 subscribers, but it was somewhere in the range of 2 to 4,000 people signed up for the email because right away, and I actually posted if you Google like Sam Parr, HustleCon, and you could see like my first email drip, I actually show all the stats to the website. So like right away, we were getting 1,000 people to come to the website because I got really good at posting it on Reddit and Hacker News. And then I took 6 months off where I traveled the country, rode my motorcycle, and then I did it again. And this time, I think we sold 600 tickets, but probably 450 to 500 people showed up. And at that point, the list had 10,000 people. So I would work for 6 weeks hosting this event, take time off, and then do it again. So like depending on how you look at it, it could either have been it took 12 weeks to get to 10,000 people, or it took 9 months, depending on how you want to measure it. But I wasn't working in between conferences, and so when I launched the daily newsletter, we had about 10,000 subscribers. And then at the end of the first year of doing the daily sends, which is what the hustle is, we had 100,000.
Wow. And so was it just you at this time at the beginning?
Yeah.
And so it's so here you are, you're writing newsletters, you're putting on these events, and then you're just taking extended periods of time off. Did you have these big ambitions to build this into something huge, or did you just think, let me rinse and repeat and do this for a while and take some money off the table?
It depends what your definition of huge is, but I wanted to go bigger than just an event. That's for sure. I wanted to originally. I was like, I want to employ thousands of people, and then and then I started thinking about it more, and I was like, I read a couple books, and I learned about a few different people like Mark Cuban and a few other folks, and I noticed that there was this like trend of the people I admired where they were able to secure like some type of financial stability and financial freedom by their like early 30s. And in doing that, that allowed them, while they were still young and had energy, to restart, but on even bigger problems because they didn't have to worry about like day to day finances. And I really admired that way. And I was like, if I could crack that code, which I think I can, I'm good. Like, that's the life I want. And so I knew I wanted to hit a certain number by the age of 30. And because of that, I was perfectly fine selling the company for, let's say, many tens of millions as opposed to trying to build a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, no, that's great that you set out. You knew what your goal was when you set out. So you built this list of 3 or 4 thousand people in a handful of weeks, which I think for most of our listeners would be the most difficult part to imagine. Because once you've got some momentum, once you've got 10,000, then you can see it go into 100 or a million. But getting those first 3 to 4 thousand people is no easy task. And so, how did you do that? Like, how did you stir up the momentum to get the first people?
And I know that that's people think that's the hardest part, and it's kind of hard. But doing it for 4 years, or 5 years, sending an email almost every single day for many, many years, and growing from 100,000 to many millions is way harder because that consistency is really, really tough. It's really hard to do something because you lose focus, you want to give up. That was really the hard part. The exciting part was going 0 to 3,000, and the way that I did it was I basically thought early on, where are the people who I want to subscribe to my newsletter? Where do they live? And in my case, I thought they live in a couple subreddits, and they live in a couple, and they live on Hacker News, which is Hacker News is kind of like Reddit, but for like geeky Silicon Valley people like me. And I thought, okay, so they live there. So then what would get their attention? Well, like a headline that mentions these 20 topics would probably get their attention. Great. I'm going to write those articles. And I'm going to get, if I can get 1 million to come to my website, I'm making these numbers up. If I get 1 million to come to my website and I can get 3% of them to convert, that's 30,000 emails. Great. How many? I know that 18 different titles, there's a chance some of those can work. So how many of those do I got to write? And then I just work backwards and I just like banged it out like constantly.
So, what were the metrics that you were watching? You mentioned conversion rate and how many people get to your website. Like, what were you laser focused on in terms of metrics for your business at the beginning?
For the first 1 to 3 years, every week, at first it was just me, and then we had a proper meeting where it was like, all right, Monday morning at 10 a.m., how did we grow our subscriber base by at least 3%? If yes, great. What do we do now? If no, why didn't we do that? And what do we got to do to get there? I wanted to grow 3% every single week until at least 200 and something thousand people. And then I looked at the open rate. The open rate had to be at least 50%.
Hmm.
And so those are basically the two metrics. But then, of course, you have to go upwards, which is in order to grow by 3%, you need this many website visits, you need this many conversion, you need this conversion rate, you need this many people to click on an article, this many people to click on an ad, like things like that. And I cared about the rest of the funnel. And I we had like, it's called F1, F2, F3, F4, where funnel one, funnel two, funnel three, funnel four. And I would like meticulously look at like, all right, I need this many people to see this site, this many people to see this page, to this page, but it was all rooted in growing my total subscriber amount by 3% every week.
And so, at what point did you hire someone else? I saw some video where you were talking about a New York Times writer that you tried to hire. So maybe you could share that story. But when did you finally hire someone?
Yeah. So the first year of business, we made like $500,000, and it was mostly from all those conferences. And then I hired a couple people. So I made money through conferences, And then I launched the hustle. And then, like, maybe a few months after, I was able to hire someone. And the first hires were some writers to help me write.
And so that was just taking up the most of your time, I guess, and that was the thing you needed to offload first.
Yeah, and the thing I hated the most, writing's hard. I like the result. I don't always like doing it. And then, like, the seventh, eighth, ninth employees were salespeople to sell ads in the newsletters.
I don't think anyone would expect you to say that writing was the thing you hated the most in starting a company with a daily newsletter with as much writing as you've done. So were you aware of that from the beginning, or did you just burn out over time?